Today is November 3rd, 2020, and we are here with Paul from Vancouver, correct?
No, I'm actually in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, you're in Denver,
That's right.
Colorado.
That's right.
I'm sorry, I misinformed. All right. Well,
Maybe you have a premonition. Maybe I'll be in Vancouver soon.
That was my fault. We've just been talking with a lot of people, just like I'm sure you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, globally.
And locations and everything kind of end up getting transposed sometimes, especially when you have a long day.
Oh, I totally understand. And then we have, a lot of different places are implementing daylight savings right now. So
Right.
It's been a real challenge. And, folding time and space is part of my my interest and focus anyway. So it makes it more of a challenge.
yes, right. Well, this is we are approaching this critical mass of individuals who are on the same wavelength all over the world. So it's all about trying to connect with each other in the time zones and the differentiation of time zones. But it's really exciting.
Well, I'm glad I
I
vacillate between being, you know, uh, very driven about my work, but also, I was just reading another article by a colleague that's oriented toward, providing truth, fact-checked proof in the narrative. And, there's unfortunately a lot of uh, discouraging things going on right now that can, take away from any type of proactive momentum to create something good for the future.
Yeah, I love that's where we're in total alignment. Like all these different projects, everybody's creative, but we're kind of in that era right now where people are so disconnected or disillusioned on what is actual truth, and they're not used to the concept of fact checking in reality. Like, what are the processes? What constitutes something that's been quantified?
Right.
And so I love it. This is awesome.
Yeah, maybe it's part of the evolution of, the merger between the physical world and the virtual world, that truth becomes something that's more and more abstract, but it's something that we need to build back into our systems,
Absolutely.
and it's really more about being authentic than being truthful. It's like, because we all have our own perceptual orientations and interpretations of things. But that's probably off subject, although still in the general scheme of things.
I'd have
But
to
how can I be of service and share with you what's going on with my work, and hopefully that will facilitate the acceleration toward building these catalyst systems.
Yes. Back to what you were just saying. We all have our own truth layered upon our experiences. And the more we can overlap those experiences to a quantifiable root, at least as a great starting point that no one can argue against,
Right.
I think we can move forward, kind of like in business processes. The better you can display the the actual root of whatever it is, say it's a root word, and then go out into context, kind of like we've been chatting about a little bit, into something that's like a consolidated flow chart. It's an accelerated learning pattern that we can all benefit from. So instead of taking 20 years to get some sort of degrees, in like a couple different areas, we don't need that. That's archaic for all the tools and abilities that we have at hand now. Um, yeah, I want to send you a couple sketches in your PM if that's all right with you, avoiding the recording, and see if we were kind of interpreting the same thing,
Okay.
and see if that's something that you have available right now. Do you have anything to work with right now to play with?
As far as information, like consolidated information.
Yes, like building out those database references, like the AI that you were bringing up yesterday.
Um,
Not necessarily
well,
publicly available, but actually to have as a collaborative workspace for us to work on these different things to try to get properly prepared before it gets pushed out for other people. You know, we know that in-house testing is one of the best places to start.
right. Well, I think it might be helpful for you to understand the, I guess, the scope, orientation, and the scale of my work, of the work of the Human Sustainability Institute. So we'd already brought up aspects of human consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So the spectrum of the systemic analysis that I've been engaged in over the last 2 decades, um, actually there is a correlation between what I would call the anthropologists or the biological evolutionists. They have come back to humanity is in a phase shift that requires an evolution of consciousness. So that's kind of where, you know, part more of the socially oriented sciences have gravitated toward. You know, and that translates to, you know, value systems, social systems, and so many other things, right?
Right.
And where I correlate that piece of it to is it's empathy, and biophilia, the love of life. So that from a value system, you know, where there's been a pandemic, effectively, of apathy toward life systems. You know, and
Yes.
that's, you know, geological life systems to, you know, human life to animal life, plant life, soil life, all that stuff, life systems. On the other side of the sciences, on the more physics side of sciences, we've there's been a conclusion that the entire operating system for civilization has become obsolete. So there's this entropy or decomposition of most of our institutions, and that spans governance, financial systems,
Yep.
architecture, you know, advanced materials usage, fuel systems, energy systems, and so on. Right. So there's this down cycle, decomposing, entropic kind of system happening on this side as well. So between those two realms, I've tried to identify a critical path or a fulcrum point, or what Buckminster Fuller referred to as a trim tab, that if we were able to apply a limited amount of energy toward that fulcrum point or that trim tab, it would influence the trajectory that we're hurling toward most significantly. So that's been my orientation of research, which has crossed a multidisciplinary spectrum of sciences and art forms and so on. So that's the realm that I've been focusing on. The the conclusion that comes across from all of that analysis is that we need to start to seed communities that are not just autonomous but globally connected. And
Right.
they're using terms like the circular economy, donut economics, to regenerative systems to produce energy and things like that. So the platform, in order to do that, spans very complex analytics, but based on bioregional data, you know,
Right.
where the infrastructure is today, what's happening with the health of the soil, where's water conditions, what's air conditions, things like that, including human biometric and kind of I was going to say psychotropic data, but psychological data, social type data, needs to go into this analytic machine, which is one of the artificial intelligences that I think I shared with you guys. Then from there, you get conceptual designs and kind of hot points of through the data visualization process to where we can start to develop regenerative infrastructure systems for those communities, and that spans urban centers to rural communities, because all those dynamics are different, and very broad range of dynamics. And then so ultimately then providing we would be basically spawning the spatial web, because we would take three-dimensional data collection and kind of living data collection of all the infrastructure systems as well as geologic data, create the spatial web. And then from there, this is where the crew and team from Civil X comes in. We need to develop an edge-based intelligence AI needs to be created,
most definitely,
that provides that user interface to the digital ecology, which is our from my perspective, and my background is AT&T and Bell Labs, so we were taking we were using biomimicry types of concepts just to figure out how to design technology to interface with the human system, ergonomics, human factors types of design. But continuing that original work, it got hijacked, but continuing that original work where the network becomes a medium of extended and collective intelligence.
Yeah.
Right.
So we, kind of from a physical standpoint, we need to figure out how to integrate carbon-based life forms with a silicon enhanced type of extension. So I usually use the term intelligence augmentation versus artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is really just algorithms.
Right.
Right. And one of the largest problems still to date is programmer bias.
Well,
and
exactly.
So like, okay, if we're gonna have a Terminator-like scenario, with the net becoming an enemy, what could we do to influence that where everything is a complement to itself? So you have maybe a new intelligence arises. Do you want that intelligence to be an enemy or a friend? So if we focus on core ethics and everything that we've been capable of learning from, consolidate it, we can inject that into the AI to be that much more of a positive complement rather than any kind of threat. The largest threat is actually ourselves.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Have you read through that introductory packet that we sent?
I didn't see an introductory packet. What medium did you send that through?
Oh.
Maybe
I may have been sending it to someone else that we were caught up in talking with and forgot about you. We had a really crazy day yesterday. It's a Google Doc. I know that we shared it in the Telegram chat.
Okay. I haven't really been involved in that because I've been focused on developing an entire basically a design center that spans infrastructure design through kind of basically a user interface platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you guys represent, in fact, I use you're one of the networks that's basically emerging. There are networks emerging all over the and I can come back and read this at a later time.
Yeah.
But there's kind of as an evolutionary process, there's been this emergence of networks, and with different orientations, from advanced materials to recycling processes to energy production to architectural processes. They're literally emerging, blooming all over the world.
Right.
And I think where we're at right now is we're at a process of where those networks need to have some coordination,
Yes.
and organization. And up until probably the last maybe 10 years, actually, it's probably even before that, when you have global organizations like the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, they host all of these planning sessions to bring all the world's experts together, and then nothing really ever happens.
Right.
So they unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of analytics that take place, which are very helpful, and I've used those. But I think where we're at right now, so then there's all the analytics which aligned with the awareness process, like this kind of waking process, a consciousness process. Then these networks have been emerging all over. But now we're in a phase where we need to implement, we need to design and implement. So all the ingredients are there, quite frankly, social systems, governance systems, financial systems, energy production, food production, all of these things, the elements and ingredients or instruments are all available. So how do we affect the movement of that? What's the catalyst? And that's where I've come in to determine that we need to, and other colleagues have identified it as pivot projects. We need to identify these communities where we can do a horizontal approach of a completely new systemic design.
Yep. And that's what
and implement that. So we
that's-
need fertile ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need fertile ground. And what I mean by fertile ground is, at a political level, there needs to be a receptivity to implement new systems, because it also affects governance systems, right?
Yes, it does.
The other thing, so that's power, that's influence, right? Gets kind of threatened by the disruption. The other piece of it is there needs to be a cultural receptivity. So there's kind of like governance receptivity and a cultural receptivity. And then there needs to be a financial avenue to fund those kinds of projects, because it is really, quite frankly, funding disruption. And I've not found, in general terms, that even the venture capitalist, impact investment community has had the ability to truly invest in proactive, disruptive types of innovations at a multi-systemic level. That's the gap. That's the delta that we need to bridge to do that. So from my perspective, what needs to happen is we need to identify these seed projects, pivot projects, that we can implement a full systemic redesign for, civilization 2.0,
Right.
that we can prototype effectively in an integrated manner. So the human interface, from the technology standpoint, the stopping point is data dignity, right? All of these systems, that from smart city deployments to the massive communications infrastructure platforms and all their different layers, it's all centralized control, which we can't have that. It needs to be democratized. Data dignity is democratized intelligence in the network, and that's where the folks at Civil X provide that user interface. And the International Forum for the Futures even concluded that it needs to be gamified, and how that interface works. And the gaming industry actually, from a hardware standpoint, is producing the computing power to run these high level analytics and systems, what I call a personalized and individualized AI avatar. And I reference, for those people that know the Iron Man series and Tony Stark. Yep. Tony Stark has an AI called Jarvis, which was named after his dad's kind of personal assistant.
And he essentially becomes his AI buddy.
He's and the role of Jarvis, is he monitors his biometrics to make sure that he's well. He also provides him he's a sentinel to everything that's on the network. So he's protected, which is like, the shadow aspect of the global web. And then he also he provides him a perspective or an orientation to all the information on the web, and feeds that back to him. And it's all oriented toward well-being, life support systems, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And most of the AI development is being funded by these large centralized organizations. So we need to find a way to create a public trust, so to speak, or a trust for the commons that can produce an edge-based AI. And who better than kind of the disruptive spirit of the gaming industry to say, especially those that have some military background of tactical intelligence, like, oh hey, and interestingly enough, the part that I've had quite frankly trouble conveying to kind of the science world is that one of the first things that a living system does, if you just analyze, biomimicry as a science, a design science, one of the first things that it does, any living organism at the cellular level or whatever, even at the molecular level, there is this exchange of energy and then information. So that's communications. Mm-hmm. And so the user interface is a critical component to the civilizational level infrastructure designs. Mm-hmm. And that becomes the continuum between that consciousness thing that I told you about before and the Earth life support systems that need to be harmonized with natural, what we could call thermodynamic or, living systems, the energy dynamics of the planet that supports regeneration of life.
Right.
So that's my realm. Very targeted right now is to implement a design center that would get funded. And I have two avenues for that. One through a university system that has been funded by actually an indigenous trust. And another one in another area that is oriented toward commercial insurance, realizing they provide insurance to these companies globally, that what's going to happen is, without resilience and being dynamic toward changes on the planet, at all levels, from a climate standpoint to social dynamics of people migrating from place to place because where they live is either going underwater, or they can't produce food, or they have civil war or whatever. There's going to be a lot of migration moving forward. So we need to start to implement resilient systems that are also regenerative.
Right.
So that's my world.
Yeah, I'm just hearing, like in our terminology, root systems. Because, like, if you're looking at problems, they turn into systemic problems. And the more systemic you look, it just looks upstream. You're going, like on a tree, you're going from the leaves down to the branches to the trunk. And the more we can focus on the trunk and the branches where they diverge, that's a massive savings and level of impact that we don't see in today's society. They don't actually fix anything. Most everything we're actually seeing are exactly that, band-aids, just a temporary fix that doesn't look at the systemic issues or anything quantifiable that validates we are looking ahead for our own benefit and growth. It's just extort, extort, extort with a proper counterbalance. So weights and means, upstream systemic issues that address large sectors of society and impacts, and multi-factored value metrics. Like, what are the gains and the means that we're using? We should be doing polling. Polling is ancient now. You know, we've had it around for multiple decades in these digital systems, just to acquire information and go, okay, well, we're voting. What do you guys want? Who do you want in this area? But it's not being done, at least on the public side that we see, for any kind of growth. If we know that this is a root thing that crosses all these boundaries of adding value to the system overall, we should be focusing on that. And it's not done.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, well, and that's because of, you know, when I'm toward the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned that a lot of the systems are in their degenerative or decomposing entropic cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can't, the way we've oriented our systems is there's a bunch of, you know, it's easy to describe them as silos. So even if you do something in one silo, make an impact, like energy, where you source your energy production, but you're not, you know, simultaneously affecting these other systems.
Exactly. It doesn't
you
create
become
positive
ineffective.
domino effect.
Yeah, there's a colleague of mine just shared an old video of Russ Akoff that he's specifically talking about, you know, disruptive innovation, and that's the only way that you can get from one platform of systems to another one. There's a delta. You're not transforming and changing these existing systems. You're creating a completely new system. So that's where all of these efforts, you know, with smart city deployments that have had like between 25 and 30 billion dollar investments allocated to them, it's all centralized control, which translates into the surveillance economy and things that won't really, then they didn't integrate other systems like food production and waste management. They might have addressed transportation and energy production and maybe part of architecture to accommodate that, but they didn't do a multi-systemic platform, which is what we are offering, is a holistic regenerative design process from, you know, analytics all the way through to user interface, feedback loops.
Well, we all know, you know, all resonating at the same area, or of like mind. We know that when we're able to get other people involved, you're able to better fortify that direction that you want to go. Everybody wants to feel included and valued, acknowledged for their input. And when you have a system that is more one-dimensional, like it's either all or nothing, distributed means that there's no hierarchy. Hierarchy is bad because you have less control. That doesn't really make sense to us. It's to what degree. There's lots of different dimensions and a lot of different factors that need to be considered, and it's not that flat. If everybody has a general guideline like the golden rule, for example. You know, we can all agree on stuff like that and use that as an anchor to a distributed uh, voting system, polling, including metrics, stuff like that. Everybody gets more included and more vested into that interest to help propel it, and it's not viewed by any of those parties as hyper consolidated, like proprietary licensing has gained a huge reputation for, like Windows back in the 80s and 90s. Um, we're all our own worst enemies. And the more we're able to access and comprehend and have an aptitude for these different contexts that are the roots of these different directions and why diverge here and why diverge over here, the better we're all going to be in support of each other, I think, and in these consolidated, intentional communities that are bridged, just like a neural network.
Are you
Yeah,
familiar with meritocracy at all?
yes.
So what we're looking at is providing that component available for public, uh, peer-to-peer um, engagement. Okay, so
Not excluding any of the other
no,
methodologies,
not
like sociocracy or anything like that. They're all
Mhm.
pieces to the cog, and that's one of the reasons why we bias favoring quantified empirical evidence. Is just showing the divergence points, and
it's
when you're able to lay it out there for people, they have that inclusion point of access to make their own decisions.
it
Mhm.
also enables people to have a sense of self-worth, which is where it all starts from anyway, in living in communities and society and improving the quality of life. It starts with self. So if somebody is suffering from depression, for example, and their neighbor comes over and says, I would like to share with you this um, challenge or mission that might help you in working through your depression, and then so that gives this other person who's suffering from depression an opportunity to reach out and have tangible goals that they can achieve that improves their quality of life, thus improving their mental state. Where we have badges that individual would receive upon completion of certain um, life training, exercises or whatever to help them with their depression, and then give them that incentive that they could get more points and merit through this badging system, which can turn into tangible rewards. So we're talking um, anything from gift certificates to goods and items, merchandise,
Mhm.
just for engaging in this process of self-improvement, improvement of self, and then going forward with the different challenges and missions that they choose. And we want to be able to have a enormous array of opportunities for people to engage in order to gain badges. And then we also have the opportunity for peer-to-peer gifting of badges. For example, if there's somebody who is feeling generous and gives a gift, a large gift or a small gift, whatever it is, to somebody in need, that they would receive a badge of generosity, and that would be a recognition, and they would be able to share that on their profile, and it would be engaging when they talk with other people. Those people can look at their history, look at what badges they've gotten, and so from there be able to have a better understanding of the spirit of intent behind that individual, and whether or not they want to be friends or whether or not they want to engage in a relationship with that individual. Bringing that vulnerable transparency to enable people to level up and rise above where they are standing now.
I appreciate that. And as you're describing it, the architecture that's necessary for the network to support that is what I've been working on.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
There's a from a network architecture standpoint, the some of the points that you described. For example, this goes back to the edge-based IA interface. That IA interface is going to be analyzing your facial expressions, and it's also going to be analyzing your voice, so we can get psychological and physiological data through various forms of biometrics.
Okay.
And then that personalized IA is going to be analyzing that and feeding back multiple types of feedback loops.
Right.
One of those feedback loops might be music that's specifically designed to elevate mood. It could be also maybe you seem scattered, and it can play music that will entrain your neurology in a way that helps you focus, or boost mood, or relax if you can't sleep. So that's one feedback loop. The other feedback loop is it's going to provide information, truth, hopefully, that of what you can do. Changes in diet,
exactly.
Increases in physical exercise, go out and experience nature. Here's a funny video of a woodchuck eating lettuce. Anything to affect your move you toward optimal function.
Right.
And then that's also going to include connecting you to people that can that are regenerative, vitalizing, optimizing, that are complementary to you, that create that community piece. And then you need the blockchain is one of our tools that's available today to do value exchange. So and that's once again, it goes back to a completely different platform for civilization to operate on, that spans so many things. So now you have like the biological data, which is, let's call it like health and wellness data. You have learning data, which is in the educational systems, academia. Then you have social systems, which are all the apps that you have on your phone and stuff. There's no integration between those. And then there's no like, here's what's going on on the planet, to where you feel that empathic connection to what you're what you're engaged in, quality of life, happiness metrics, whatever, value exchange systems. A great short video that I reference for what we're, quite frankly, what we're all in moving toward. And I've been considering myself or a kind of a vernacular that people understand, people like yourselves that are trying to catalyze these new systems, I refer to as the imaginal cells. So humanity is going through, so I don't like transformation, because it's really not.
What about traverse? It's a wonderful traversal, like a quest.
Well, I like the term metamorphosis.
I like that one too.
That's a good one.
Because if you think about it, humanity has been in a very parasitic, consumptive manner, and it's linear, right? The caterpillar eats and gets puts on weight, grows and grows and grows. And right now, according to different forms of complex systems analytics, we are in an event horizon window. And it literally 2020 seems to be the start of it. And some of the analyses I've seen, it spans between 2050 to 2060. Some are extending it out for 100 years.
Wow.
But the essence of that is so we've moved out of the caterpillar phase, where it's become obsolete. You know, we've gone beyond, we've consumed beyond planetary boundaries of life support systems. And we've added a whole bunch of pollutants and toxins to the environment that are not supportive of life. And it's not engaged in the whole, you know, recycling and, you know, decomposition and creation and emergence cycles. So now this event horizon could also be considered a chrysalis phase. And that's where the caterpillar basically breaks down into a goo, into kind of fundamental elements. And the imaginal cells that existed inside of that caterpillar from the beginning are effectively architects to redesign all of those fundamental elements of the caterpillar into a butterfly, which becomes a regenerative pollinator, you know, at a very fundamental level of life support systems, right?
Yep.
It's creating more life than it's consuming. So that's the phase shift that people like Schmachtenberger and others have referenced, is this civilizational phase shift, which relates to consciousness, and it also relates to the built environment operating systems of civilization. That's where we're at. So, you know, the reason, you know, we are connected through the group that's developing that end user interface, and that is absolutely essential that get employed as soon as possible, because that provides the appropriate feedback loop into the network to function as a medium of extended and collective intelligence, which relates to your transactional, someone's being generous, you know, meritocracy kind of thing. How do they even find out, you know, that a person might need support, or, you know, that's all communications and energy. And then the value exchange, the tokens or the badges that you referenced, that's value exchange, right? And I could even boil that down to, you know, you referenced the tree, the roots.
Yes.
You know, fundamentally, this is an energy exchange, kind of thermodynamics. And you referenced the tree, which is a great example of a toroidal vortex,
Right.
of how things are taken up, you know, and, you know, how energy is transferred.
This consolidation of the information, and like we were talking about earlier about hierarchies, one of the really interesting things that we're going to be all a part of seeing is the transition of people's perspectives of looking at it as a hierarchy, and the way that we're all realizing it needs to be where everybody's included and it's self-regenerative. It ends up turning into a mirroring of it, the hourglass effect, turning into that toroidal experience where it actually it's just a consolidation point, like we see in quantum theory and quantum mechanics and everything being explained. You look at different forms of electricity and magnetism, the ley lines. That's how our entire ecosystem is designed, not just on Earth, but you look at the whole solar system. It's all a biomimicry pattern, which we also see in our minds when you look at neurology. So we're very thankful for this opportunity to come together and not just connect or meet, but actually get hands-on and participate in the construction of what we know inherently needs to be done. And a lot of us very frustrated on why it's not already been done. With as far
Yeah,
as we are
right.
as a human race, you know, people talk about race, we get a little agitated because it just exposes their ignorance.
There's only
That
one race on this planet
we're
of
human. Human is a
humans.
race, you know, and that's a disjointed perspective in cognizance, you know, of where society is. They don't even realize this base root fundamental of who we are as a whole, or even them as an individual. You know, we have different sectors of humanity that have diverged, and we don't even know our own history, most of us. If you don't know your own history, what do we know? We know we're going to repeat. And oh, you were so horrible because of racism and because of slavery and stuff. Well, if you're not willing to go ahead and learn from that, you are just as culpable and just on the early cusp of just prior to actually doing that yourself. You're going to become that perpetrator. And we see that with resiliency at the core, with people making a bad choice at just a certain moment, diverging their entire life, their whole future life. Now they go into the criminal system, and then, you know, how are you going to get back out of it? Most people within that type of a scenario, which is no different from addiction cycles, the very small percentage of those people that become victimized from whatever the tragedy or trauma end up recovering and succeeding out of it into somewhat of a normal path. And if we don't do something to fix that, to address it on a whole that is like viral and systemic to that level and degree that's continually perpetual, we're only going to doom ourselves.
Right. You know, some of the, you know, folks I work with in academia, they, you know, there is a lack of vision of a more utopian future. You know, most of the narrative is dystopian,
Right.
and you know that affects all kinds of things. It affects, you know, that's what our orientation is
Yep.
toward. It lowers, it activates, you know, more of like fear responses, not courage or inspiration. Um, so, I mean, part of the process of the imaginal cells of society is that one, we need to create a vision of what that architecture looks like. You know, what does a positive future look like? And then from there, I mean, because then you're catalyzing, stimulating innovation. We can
Yes.
do it. We've built all kinds of amazing things, and in fact, a lot of those things already exist. They just need to be put together into a thing that's attractive,
Yeah.
that people will gravitate toward, which is, you know, also another dynamic in physics, right? You need to have that attractor. So the vision, and that's where arts and culture comes in, extremely important, you know, through the music, through the various forms of art,
And
and
frequency
creativity
realms,
is, pardon me?
realms of frequency also. It's that magnetism. We all vibrated at different frequencies, and yes, just yes, yes, yes. It all
Yeah.
overlaps. This is just amazing. Are you a car guy?
Yeah, I've been rebuilding and updating cars since I was a young person, for sure.
Okay,
Why
so
do you
you know
ask?
when you need to go ahead and do a rebuild, and you take your crank in to get balanced.
Mhm.
If you're on the performance side, like an enthusiast, um, you go, well, where do I want it to just sing? Where's that harmonic just balance where it's absolute music, right?
Right,
Same thing when balancing your air fuel ratio on a carburetor.
right.
You've got that central point where it's kind of self-amplifying. The mixture is just perfect. You've got the absolute beautiful burn that's really even. You get the beautiful snap, like with the torque, the throttle response, and everything. We see the same thing with timing. We see the same thing within biomechanical and chemical reactions.
Right.
Our neurons and synapses and everything like that. It's just amazing. The more we learn, the more we see these things reflected within different realms, whether it's in biology or chemicals, in physics, in mechanics. Yeah, we were just having a conversation about this a little while ago with another contact in kind of creating teams, ranking up all the way up to like an alpha team where you have true alphas where they're fundamentally balanced, well anchored in that yin and yang omnipresence, where you can step back out of your current situation or mindset to see the good, better, best options of these scenarios and really lead by leading yourself, starting there outward into these other teams, and where that gets amplified and mirrored through your peers. So everybody is an amazing complement to each's specialty or skills and passions. And so the whole group or pod just really complements each other, and you only have one direction to go, is just bloom.
So one of the things we do.
Well, hold on. Let's let you get back to what you were saying first.
Okay.
So, you'd mentioned hierarchies before. A lot of those are mechanical systems, effectively in their design, as well as an overly dominant certain kind of energy pattern that is consumptive, quite frankly. So also referencing biomimicry, what's this emergence of networks. These networks are because how do you organize this group? You can't use previous business models to create these systems and organizations to get focused on a particular objective and things like that. But the thing that seems to be kind of coming out of this is if you think of them as organs within a larger symbiotic system. So you guys had mentioned the human race. Well, the human race is an organism, a symbiotic organism within a larger living ecology. Right. So if we look at humans as aspects of symbiotic organs within that system, then you start to see things differently. And like, how do we organize? Like part of us you mentioned like mirrors, we see something happen. That's like, to me, I translate that to mirror neurons. I'll send you guys 2 links. One is from Russ Akoff. It's a brief video, and he's basically talking about new systems disruption, innovation, and innovative systems disruption, and that is absolutely where we are right now. Is in the chrysalis to design what these new systems look like. I'll also send you a link to, I think, a fabulous 9+ minute video that Jeremy Rifkin put together for I think a UK based kind of arts and sciences organization, but it's titled the Empathetic Civilization, and he very concisely describes that is our potential, and we're literally one stage behind that phase shift into an empathetic. But he shows that we are mapped by design, both environmentally and from a DNA and RNA standpoint, to get to that empathic civilization model that he's coined. From a structure standpoint, a biospheric structure standpoint, I refer to this work as the development of the noosphere. Are you guys familiar with that term by Chardin?
Not yet. I've seen it in the chats a couple times, but haven't had an opportunity to dig into it yet.
So the noosphere, very basically, it's kind of like the optimal biospheric design, which requires harmonic energy systems in all their forms, balance toward a kind of a more of like a stasis, which we've mutated away from significantly. But that's going to require a completely new, like, how do we exist symbiotically within this larger ecology? And one of my favorite advisors is Elizabeth Saturas, and she wrote a fantastic article called Ecosophy, which you guys might appreciate.
Okay.
Just to give you some context about this trajectory that we're on, and that it actually, quite frankly, she refers to it as a maturation, like we become more mature as a species in this larger ecology. So she refers to it as maturity. Others refer to it as a phase shift in consciousness, and all those types of things. But the essence is that fulcrum point, from my perspective, is that we need to start to seed these new systems, communities globally in different bioregions to kind of establish these proof of concepts that, hey, this works, it's resilient and it's regenerative. It's still connected to the rest of the planet. I think some of the eco-village people, they wanted to become isolated,
Right.
And create this smaller closed loop system, which is kind of ridiculous in my opinion. But I can see where they were trying to get away from, this trajectory that all of our other institutions are propelling us toward. So I get it. That's all part of the evolution. It's part of the breakdown. It's like, we don't want to play in these systems. And I see individuals and professionals literally from all kinds of disciplines and sections that have left the machine, so to speak. And so I agree with you. You had mentioned that I think there's a massive part of the population that globally that are poised for contributing, meritocracy wise, toward this new platform. But there's nobody's designed it yet. So,
Right.
Other than people like Jacques Fresco with the Venus Project, I mean, they had a lot of the structures have already been designed. We just haven't implemented. So, that's where we're at. And then I think once those take off, once a couple of those are created and people can say, oh, I would like to live like that. And that's pretty cool. And, that applies to that bioregion. And this one applies to a different bioregion,
right?
Tropical to, 4 seasons and high altitude and all that, and it's amazing. But we need to create those we need to plant those seeds.
Call that pollinary.
Yeah. And then we can become pollinators, right? Of that kind of system. But that absolutely is in my opinion, it's on the critical path that these some people have referred to them as charter communities. These charter communities need to be established so they can be proof of concept, and they need to be multi-systemic in their operations, from everything from governance to value exchange to social network systems to food production, blah blah blah, energy production. All of these.
Quote Brandon from Plant Systems.
That's who Lumi suggested I speak with next.
Yeah, we call that federated. in the techie realm.
Federated.
And we actually have looked into federating. You know, we're talking about a lot of issues that are co-creationary. We're talking about cooperatives and communities and being able to branch out and connect cooperative communities together. And so we've been looking at several different legal entities or frameworks
and all of that.
and one of them is doing it as a federation, like the Universal Federation, you know, Starfleet, that whole concept, and bringing it into this real world, but having this opportunity for people who may not want to go into the real world just now to experiment, to find out in a virtual realm, you know, and in stories, and that's so one of the stories that we are promoting is a story I wrote in 2007. It's called Quantum Quinn and the Night Mirror, and this is based on the teachings of that were shared through What the Bleep Do We Know and Dr. Quantum, and how Dr. Quantum broke it down into basically third grade quantum physics realm to help people understand it better. And if we give people that third grade physics understanding of quantum physics and the ability to virtually go through a portal like a mirror and explore on the quantum level, whether it is a personal situation that they're exploring or a scientific educational experimentation or whatever, that there's a way to go there to become a virtual traveler and start learning these things, even if it's just starting with a conceptual level of understanding, then it becomes more apparent, and they can, like, it'll be second nature when they start actually integrating into a new understanding paradigm of what's in it for me.
Kind of like what we've seen with the millennial generation. I'm guessing that you're probably another Generation Xer like myself.
Yeah, I'm first year Generation X.
So like on the tech side, you know, I know David Ellison's mentioned Apollo, so I'm guessing that's GraphQL's Apollo with federating functions right there on the edge. So it's all the same concept, and we've been trying to look at what's common through these different lenses. We see a lot of technology construction and architecture in different levels, and so how does that operate within different business entities, like their IRS tax exemption status, you know, from nonprofit to for-profit? And we've done some homework on that. We need some gaps filled. If you know anybody looking in that area, we would love to work with them on that area and incorporate it, like with what you're doing with the worldwide OS, these personalized consoles, and we've been looking at it like with not Operation Shield, but Marvel's Agents of Shield and Tony Stark's holodecks, not holodecks, but the holograms with those consoles. We should all be able to have access to something like that right now,
and have our own digital buddy on our wrists that's doing those biometrics and determinations. You know, like Elon Musk has that Neuralink that he's now promoting a lot of with individuals, but that still requires a surgical implant, right? If we could start getting something that's available to the people that they don't have to implant, they'll be more likely to adopt it as a addition.
Well, like the Apple Watch goes in that direction to a degree.
To a degree.
And some of the off brands. I think we've all got some amazing ideas that really need to get into that workspace that we can visualize, create this map of how these different things connect and diverge, and going into like the linguistic differences. It goes into law, it goes into medicine, physical magnetic fields and such. Who's complementary to what, and let them follow their path, aligning these skills and passions in a really easy to conceive and comprehend ways. Visual mapping is one way we would love to see it. At least I would. That's one of the reasons why I brought up Neo4j, because it looks like it consolidates a lot of those different toolings that until we've seen them come around, no one else has done it yet. So if you've got something like that already incorporated, tell us when the meeting is.
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of ideation that's out there. The imaginal cells are going, ballistic in, the innovation and creative pieces of it. But we need to, the focus is to basically align and organize to the sense of, now we can actually manifest,
Right.
into the physical form, the, these systems. The biometric sensors that you're talking about, a lot of them already exist. They have these like ultralight, integrated into sports clothing, like base
Right.
layer shirts and stuff. The elite athlete field has already been doing that. The same with space exploration, astronaut technologies. A lot of these things are already in existence. But what we need to do, like you said, how do we make a lot of these capabilities available to the commons?
Yeah.
And from my perspective is we got to have some type of a focal point,
Right.
to create this organ that that can integrate these different systems, and then distribute them. And so, one of the organizations I've been working with is called Bella Gaia, which stands for Beautiful Earth. And Kenji has created this entertainment production that has traveled all over the world to over 300 venues, and wants to create a physical facility in New York to use immersive media that and kind of an immersive media environment that we're using, geo level data from NASA, and to catalyze the empathetic response that the astronauts experienced, called the overview effect. Right? And that's empathy. It's empathy toward this, pale blue dot that's, in the void of space. That's pretty amazing. So that's biophilia, the love of life. So he wants to create this venue that will serve as kind of a mirror neuron image to say, oh, we're catalyzing, the attractor is entertainment, right? Let's go see this amazing immersive media experience set to music and dance and all these beautiful storylines and narratives, which you mentioned with your story, right? There is this huge pent up demand of the storytellers that are oriented toward this new narrative. So again, I'll go back to the network. The network needs to be able to convey that new narrative, that people can access it individually through their digital interface device, right? That needs to happen. So, and it's going to be, the site will also be a demonstration site for, this is how we're producing energy. This is what we're doing with water. This is how we're producing food in an urban setting like New York. We've already established contacts with the vertical farmers that have converted, like old warehouse or commercial facilities into urban growing, urban agriculture. we'll be demonstrating, new forms of architecture, it'll be a demonstration site. We'll probably have some like electric scooters and all the fun, transport kinds of mediums that are, regenerative and, at least to the best of our current ability to do so.
Kind of
So
like a
there's
next
that side.
generation CES.
And that's, we need money. Everybody needs money. How are you gonna convert all these ideas into systems?
Mhm.
So quite frankly, that's been kind of the hardest obstacle to get through, because it is multi-systemic. You have to have government approvals, whether that's at a municipal level or state or national level.
Mhm.
So there's that dynamic that you have to overcome, and then there's also funding available there if they're interested in infrastructure and innovation toward wellness and learning. I've kind of abandoned the term education, and
Up training.
now, pardon me,
It's up
I,
training.
I use knowledge transfer.
Right?
That's really what it is. The stories and the narrative is knowledge transfer, is fundamentally what it is. And so, so we have that site can serve as a kind of a World's Fair demonstration site that has, some of what I consider the elite athletes of the world, astronauts, kind of conveying, this. They're sharing their empathy toward, Gaia, toward life, the life on the planet that we have. And then there's another site. It seems like the island nations are more progressive because they're dealing with migration issues, they're dealing with extreme storm issues. They seem to be moving more rapidly toward this new platform. At least there's a receptivity there. So I'm seeing that. And then then there's these other networks that are all poised to contribute, but we need to get to the point where there's a decent amount of funding available to integrate these technologies and create these prototypes. And so that to me is the critical path. And we have a very tight time window in which to do that, before the majority of civilization moves, quite frankly, into a reactive state, fully reactive. And we're kind of in that now, because of the COVID introduction into the life systems on the planet, and how that's affected this and how we've reacted to that. And the interesting thing is, there's been no talk about wellness resilience. Like, how come I haven't seen it, other than from my direct colleagues in the healthcare and wellness industries that are saying, how come there's been little to no talk about boosting or optimizing your immune system? There once again is there's a cultural entrainment around fear and reactionary, someone else displacing and deferring ownership or responsibility. Oh, I'll just wait for the vaccine, versus, oh well, maybe if I ate well and I exercised and I drank clean water and maybe I supplemented my diet with some vitamin C and B complex kinds of things, that would boost my immune system.
That's part of that consumer culture and how it's gone so sour. Like, I come from the medical field, I've done back office field and all kinds of areas of it, and I was just infuriated. Like, I'm doing a little bit of homework into what's being said because I've been out of the field for a while. just to verify, which is what you're supposed to do as an informed individual. I'll
be right
this
back.
is nothing scary. And oh, we already got it like 3 months before it was even announced publicly. I know how to troubleshoot. I've done years. My father was a medic, you know. My youngest son's pediatrician was a flight medic. I've been into orthopedics, radiology. I was going up towards a path for nuclear medicine because of how beneficial it is as an actual course of treatment for the individual as well as across the board. You know, there's no point in killing the entire body when you could localize the treatment and have an average improvement overall of like 70%. You know, 70% faster recovery time. You don't have nearly as many instances of remission. You don't have all these different negative effects. Cancer research, viral research, it's abhorrent. Like the more you know about it, the more it just disgusts you. And these people and organizations are participating in terrorizing people when they don't even realize it. Like we've had cures, actual cures for cancer for decades. You look at some of the Brazilian or South American melons, they've got an 85% natural aggression rate against non-Hodgkin's forms, you know, with near zero ill effects. You've got 200 to 400,000 IUs of vitamin C over the course of a month with I think it was Hodgkin's forms was the primary focus. Even a formation up to the size of a soccer ball on the shoulder treated within 30 days. Oh no, worst case effects are dry mouth, dizziness, you know, a little bit of ickiness, as opposed to killing so many areas of the body, which is a perpetual feeding of the cancer gene being triggered. So now you're going to get more instances of that thing that you are trying to get away from. The more our body's physiology, like the chemistry, is kept in line, it's multiple layers and levels of immune system. It's not just our red or white cells. It's not just is the lymphatic system working or not. It's how is it being maintained and fortified? What's its optimal realm of frequency? Where does it sing? If we can do that and have that perpetuated across different areas of life, whether it's our psyche, our physical well-being, how we interact socially with people, how we interact with electronics, machinery, the more we can keep it to a baseline of complementary and reciprocal, where things are a complement to each other, the closer we're going to keep into that sweet spot in our living. Like even just our daily routine, how healthy is it for us? Are we ingesting a whole bunch of negative context like smear campaigns versus something that's going to keep you in that higher state of thinking or productivity? Are you happy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where there's a difference between, well, it's optimizing life support systems. Quite frankly, is the fundamental theme, and that goes all the way back to your AI discussion earlier. Is that there needs to be it's an orientation, it's a phase shift in orientation toward optimizing life versus consuming it, or just kind of consuming it, getting through it, consuming as much as you can, taking energy from others, and versus generating it yourself. There's a lot of aspects to to that dynamic. I mean, even our, you know, our healthcare system is really designed as sick care, not for wellness.
Right.
So what you're talking about is, I mean, think about an AI that is designed and can access, you know, a global database of information that's truly oriented toward your optimizing your life, right? That now all of a sudden that feedback loop that we talked about before, where you know it's analyzing biometrics, it's protecting you from you know the kind of the villains of the web, and then but it's also opening you up to from a wellness standpoint to say, oh, here are some great things that you can eat. Here's you know anything information feedback loops that are to optimize your well-being. Can do more than any doctor that studies medicine from a particular perspective and orientation, like Western medicine. Now you have this global database of analytics that can take process or that can be engaged to help facilitate that direct feedback loop to you, to optimize your own wellness and quality of life. That's way better than the system that we have right now. Now we're great. We're still going to need trauma care, but the wellness piece of it gets kind of it operates kind of autonomously. You know, and then you have your reactive trauma care piece, you know, in case of accidents and things like that, which I think, you know, the medical and healthcare industry has done a fantastic job of that. It's just it's been perpetuating that sick care, which is through pharmaceuticals, you know, destructive modalities with using energy medicine, different forms of radiation, and so on, versus repurposing that toward. I like to use the example of the movie Elysium. I don't know if you saw that movie, but there's a theme in that movie. It's about basically where the elites live in this resort like satellite, you know, out of reach of, you know, the commons. But the main reason people want to get up there is not to live the lavish life that the you know that satellite provides for the elites, but to access their healthcare platform, which is this device, this immersive device that they call the reatomizer. I don't think very many people picked up on that's the, you know, that was kind of the main drive for people to kind of get to Elysium. But that was resounding for me because, you know, being able to enabling, you know, access to healthy food, clean water, clean air, and, you know, the most advanced wellness technologies is a fundamental drive for humans. You know, we want to be healthy. So anyway, but I hope I can help. I hope I've helped. At least you guys know kind of what my the focus of my efforts are, and that's effectively to create these design centers that pulls together. They integrate a lot of these technologies, and then the throughput of those design centers are community master plans that are all oriented around, you know, everything from, you know, being regenerative for food production, energy production, transportation, architecture, materials, sciences, so on. And then the user interface that will come back through and interface with now these kind of vital kinds of community platforms as our means of interaction, and then also global connection, which translates to, you know, the narrative, the storylines, the, you know, value exchange systems, to knowledge transfer for learning and education and things like that. So that's my objective, and so that's also my connection to the Civil X folks, because you know, it'll be very interesting to integrate basically civil engineers, holistic civil engineers, regenerative civil engineers, with the high level creativity of the gaming folks that are oriented toward the same thing, this empathic civilization, building the
Yeah, this is going to
noosphere.
be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then you have like material scientists, and so there's this consolidation. I have an image in the concept deck of the Atlas Biospheric Design Center, where I kind of show this organizational process, which I referenced, like all the different networks and things like that. But we're the imaginal cells now need to start building different components of the butterfly, and that's where we're at. And so we need the financial resources to do that. We need the technological resources and the intellectual resources to do that, to start building these prototypes. Kind of anywhere.
And the money's out there.
Pardon me?
The money is out there. If we go in it from a service-oriented perspective, like connecting community service sectors together through an interactive network, that will be funded. I mean, there's money for specifically that. Sense making is another area where even the federal government is putting funding. They're saying we need people to help with sense making here. We need some. So it's what we put together as part of Great Works Alliance platform is a community service evaluation, or advocate evaluation form. So there are actually several forms that we've created. One is for referrals, one is for evaluations of community services and businesses, and then the other one is for advocate referral and evaluation as well, because we need to be adding the ability for the consumer to be able to tell what their experience was with a specific service. And that is going to feed back into improving those services, connecting services that have not otherwise been connected. And one of the ways that we've come up with is having kiosks. Currently we have kiosks in the welfare office and at hospitals and other agencies, but a lot of the government agencies are shut down to the public, and the kiosks are internal kiosks. They are not kiosks where there's a public transparency and evaluation available. If you have a complaint because you've been mistreated by somebody who's supposed to be helping you, you're only complaining to the upper management. You're not really going to the public side, and so that other people know, oh, this person is not adequate, doesn't do the proper job, mistreating people. That person still ends up working at that welfare office or whatever. And their inability to relate or be a helpful person like they're supposed to gets swept under the rug and hidden from public view. And then they just continue laundering money into upper management, saying that, well, we need all this upper management to pay to correct the problem, when it should be already in plain sight. This is what the problem is. This is how to correct it. And let's work together to do that.
So an instance of the IoT feedback, just an instance like that, and an access point for Jarvis, like using a spa app. Right. Whatever consolidated view panel necessary at that junction point, but it's an access point as a junction point to go, I need this, I need that, whether it's local services guide or feedback. That feedback can extrapolate into getting paid to play based on the interaction level and engagement of the user, and in making a positive impact within that local community. So instead of those services being paid out with a contract of like $5 million to XYZ company, it just gets moved and reallocated, no different from any other contract um, partnership.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just a divertment into a more productive means and propelled and engaged by the community.
Yeah. That's the, I see that as a, part of the network architecture, that we have systems like Yelp and other review types of systems that I think some of these different organizations, they're tapping into for, systems improvement processes and so on. But just like, someone has you can write a terrible review for someone on Facebook or whatever. So yeah, that's just a feedback loop.
Right.
To
And it
me.
just goes into the cycle that we're able to participate into going full cycle. So something is actually followed up on. There are actual means for checks and balances. And so like the kiosks could be a checkpoint, like I described earlier in the Telegram chat, expanding out into more elaborate systems like a full-on immersion system, say over at Indra's warehouse, where you get that full experience. You got multiple monitors. You could play within Unity, or in the game, really getting involved and not limited quite so much as you would with the minor check system.
Right.
Checkpoint.
Another way to look at it is, and this is something that Nate and I have discussed before, you know how here in the state of California and there in Colorado and other states across the country, we have these wildfires that are cropping up, right?
Mm-hmm.
A part of the problem has been that the electrical companies failed to keep the lanes clean in the forests, and then we have the storms and dry weather causing these fires and igniting the forest on fire. One of the ways in which we could implement, something of a checks and balance here is if you're in a town, for example, that has some dead trees that are overhanging the power lines, that you can actually take a picture, make a report, go through the process, and it get addressed. And who was the one that caught it? You. So you get compensated for the work that you did in bringing up this danger and preventing a fire that may have already been in the works.
So that's kind of like an alternative to what we've seen with medical deliveries, for example. I've done medical deliveries to a number of different types of organizations, like care facilities, and the process is you need to go ahead and it's basic contractor work. You go to the site, you pick up your equipment or whatever the product is, and you check in here at each point while you're on the drive, like Uber, and you deliver it. Well, some of these are not narcotics. You've got escalated levels of security that have to be addressed. So, okay, well, we're going to take a picture, show I had proof of possession, proof of transfer. It's now in their possession. It's not much different from what we already see in current technology and business practices. Just a bit more imaginative and reciprocal with the people.
Right. Hey, you guys, I have a hard stop at 12:45 our time,
That's good.
which is a minute away. So it's been a pleasure meeting you and sharing information. And I guess we'll I'll probably see more of you guys on kind of on the Civil X development side as we move forward and make some progress. So it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
But I better get, and hopefully we will have another conversation again soon.
Sounds
All
great.
right.
You have a great day. Thank
You
you,
guys
Paul.
do the same. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Wait. So this was Lyra and Nate with Great Works Alliance. We are here as we have openings for anybody that wants to talk about these subjects and how we can better work together as we move forward and shift into more regenerative and sustainable practices and living for the improvement of quality of life for everyone on this planet. Have a great day.